Hello, Year 6, and welcome to your first English lesson, your remote English lesson, learning from home. Um, I'm going to be doing your English videos this week, and as you'll probably realise, I'll be adding lots of things in as we go throughout the week. So anything that you give me that you want to see inside of a lesson, I'll just pop in. Any sort of ideas that you want me to do, like maybe a Joe Weeks thing where he changes everything once every lesson. You've got to try and guess what it is. Something like that. I'll be doing that as well. Plus, I'm usually halfway through a video when I realise that I remember I need to get something as well. So that sort of stuff might happen. However, I have got a pair of scissors with me. What else have I got? Some Smarties. I've got them with me. A screwdriver as well, just in case. And then, if you really need to, just a football as well, in case you need something like that. Today, this lesson, what we'll be doing is we're starting a new topic on Australia. So by the end of these 2 weeks, you will have, if you remember when we did our Charles Darwin thing, a double page spread, but I'll be showing you all that as we go throughout the week. And you'll be doing a non-chronological report about Australia. I bet you're thinking, well, why are we going to do it about Australia? It's got nothing to do with the Victorians that we were talking about before. It has got a link. Bear with me, I promise you. Today, though, I'm going to share a screen with you now. I'm going to share the slides now. You should now be able to see that, and I'm in the corner there. Hello. How nice. So this is we're going to be using our retrieval practice to learn about Captain Cook discovering Australia. And I bet you're thinking who's this Captain Cook is. Again, we'll be learning about that in a bit. But we'll be using our retrieval finders with a bit of reading that we'll be doing. So just so this is us, this is the UK over here, and we're learning about a completely different country, completely other side of the world, in a completely different continent as well. So we're in the continent Europe, over here with this collection of countries, and over here is Australia. Now, I've drawn a line as to the way that you would sail there. However, Captain Cook sailed the complete other way around, and he went all the way around the South America, off this side of the map. He didn't then just disappear. He then appeared at this side of the map, and then came around to some of the islands around here, and then back to Australia. And then from there, he then sailed all the way back to the UK. So I bet you're thinking, when did he do this? So Britain colonised Australia. Now that word colonised in there, I don't know if some of you can remember what that word means. Have a quick pause of the video, see if you can remember what the word colonised means. It's when we went over to a different country and almost invaded that country and claimed it as our own. So if you remember, I was talking about the British Empire during the Victorian era, and that's where we almost claimed quite a bit of the world. And if you remember that fact, we ended up claiming 25% of the world at our height of the British Empire. So in 1788, some of you might recognise that date isn't quite the Victorian era, which started in 1837. Britain colonised Australia. So then 51 years later, there you go, 51 years later, the Victorian era started. No, 49 years later, I was right the first time around. The Victorian era started. So I bet you're thinking then, well, why we didn't talk about this? Why this? Why now? So this is a bit of a fact here that might hopefully help you link our learning with what we're doing in history to what we're doing now. So during the Victorian era, a punishment for crime. So if you remember, we were learning about Sir Robert Peel, who invented or sort of founded the police in London. A punishment for crime was to be deported to Australia, so sent to Australia to carry out manual labour to help Britain build more towns and cities over in Australia as well. Now, that word manual labour, some of you might be linking that to our workhouses. That's when they're doing really extremely hard physical work. So that's, they were forced to do that while they're over in Australia. Quite a long way to go, really, for a punishment, wasn't it? But we'll be talking more about this on Wednesday, where you'll be looking at different crimes they committed and also building your own ship to take over there. For now, though, Captain Cook. Thinking, who's Captain Cook, Mr. Barker? I haven't got a clue who he was. Well, Captain Cook, he was called James Cook. He was born in 1728 on the 7th of November. He was English. And he was renowned. We know him now as like a massive explorer of the world, really. So when Cook was 18, he became a merchant sailor. So that's when he started delivering goods around the world. He then joined the Navy and became a master at making maps. Now, I know some of you might remember that word cartographer. That is somebody who then makes maps, who goes and explores something and then writes down, draws where they've been. And that's why we know the world that we've got today. So the map that we see today, that's why we've got that, because of cartographers. So I'm going to read from this book now. Now, this book here, if I can try and, I'm going to stop screen sharing, and then I'm going to change my camera to this one, but you'll also realize that everything's back to front. So I also then have to change a bit of a setting. Give me a second. There we go. So hopefully now you can see this. This book that we've got here, this would have been your sort of curriculum enhancer. See if I can see more of it. There we go. This would have been your curriculum enhancer. So this was the one that we would have shared one between two, and we would have gotten out and read from whenever we needed it. So this lesson, we're going to be looking at the first chapter, which is all about where is the Great Barrier Reef. Right, I'll introduce the book first. Where is the Great Barrier Reef? So we'll learn about what the Great Barrier Reef is. It is off the coast of Australia, east coast of Australia. As you can probably tell, it's got something to do with being underwater as well. So here it says, where is the Great Barrier Reef? That's the sort of chapter we're going to be reading. Now, you can always rewind this video and pause it so you can read this book in your own time. I will read it to you now, but there will be some questions afterwards. So then feel free, obviously, to rewind the video, pause it, and try and find the answer to those questions. So where is the Great Barrier Reef? This, obviously, hopefully you've realised now, is Captain Cook. And this is August the 26th, 1768. So you'll realise it's a few years before, in fact, 20 years before we colonised Australia. So the HMS, now hopefully we realise what HMS stands for. Thanks, Miss Hurty. The HMS Endeavour, under the command of Captain James Cook, set sail from England. The British Royal Navy and a scientific group called the Royal Society of London were sending Cook halfway across the globe to the South Pacific island of Tahiti. Why? With an astronomer and other scientists, Cook was to record the passage of the planet Venus across the face of the sun. They would compare their measurements to measurements other astronomers were taking around the world. This would help them figure out the distance between the Earth and the sun. Months later, in June 1769, the work in Tahiti was done, but Captain Cook was not going home. Not yet. He had been given a sealed letter before he left England. Now, a sealed letter is one that they sort of put a wax blob on the envelope to prove that no one's ever opened it. So if you get that letter and the wax blob is still intact, that means that no one's opened it and it's now still sealed. Now he could open it. The letter contained a set of orders for a second mission, a secret mission. And there he is reading the secret mission. Cook was to sail from Tahiti to a place known only as Terra Australis Incognita. I've just realised, hopefully that might help. I'll try to focus the camera there. This is Latin for unknown south land. Today, we call it Australia. Now, have a think, why do you think it was called the unknown south land then? 40-year-old Captain Cook was a very experienced sailor and explorer. British Royal Navy wanted him to explore Australia's east coast. No European had ever seen this land. So if I look at this map for you, here is England all the way over here. Now, as I said before, well, the map we saw a minute ago, England was in the middle and Australia was all the way over here. But they put England over here in this map. And if you follow the arrows, he went all the way around South America first, then this island of Tahiti, then that's New Zealand that we've got here, and then this is the east coast of Australia. And it said way back then, no European had ever seen this land before. So people in Europe over here had never been to the east coast of Australia, which makes me think maybe they've been to the west coast of Australia. On April the 19th, 1770, the Endeavour reached this part of Australia. Cook later named it New South Wales. Now, we might recognise this name, Wales, because we've also got a country in the United Kingdom called Wales, and claimed it for England. So he named it after that country, named it New South Wales. Now, this sort of removes us from the actual story so far. This is like a little bit of a did you know fact file in the halfway through the chapter. And this is just then telling us about the states of Australia. Now, you might recognise in America, they've got states, and it's the same in Australia as well. So we've got over here, each state has got a capital, so you might recognise some of the names as well. Sorry, my camera doesn't seem to want to focus at the moment, does it? Let me try my hardest to get that to phone, see if that works. So we've got Western Australia, which is a huge state over there, and the capital for West Australia is Perth. We've then got South Australia, really, really imaginative name there. And then we've got Adelaide is the capital over here. We've then got Northern Territory. Oh, now we're branching out a bit with new names. And oh, look what the capital's called, Darwin. Interesting. Then we've got Queensland. I wonder why we called it Queensland. And the capital there is Brisbane. Then we've then got New South Wales, which is where we've just learned Captain Cook then. And the capital there is Sydney. Then we've got a starred capital here, which is the actual capital of the whole of Australia, called Canberra. And then we've got another state here called Victoria. Oh, I wonder where they got that name from. And the capital of Victoria is Melbourne. Okay. So at the time of Cook's voyage, journey around the world, Australia had not yet been settled by Europeans. It was called either Terra Australis Incognita or New Holland, named by the Dutch sailors from Holland who had explored its western shores, so they'd come and landed here. So we also known it as New Holland, because obviously the people from Holland had called it that. In the 1780s, people from England began to move to Australia. In 1788, a border between New South Wales in the east and New Holland in the west was established. And in 1829, so when's that? About 8 years before Victorian time there, England claimed all of Australia. The English established colonies, much like the 13 original colonies of the United States, so it's very much like America, that we did there. In 1901, Australia became its own country with 6 states, plus federal territories and a capital district. Remember that date there, 1901. What happened in 1901? Something happened to the Victorian era. And then all of a sudden, Australia has now become its own country now. Okay? So we're carrying on with Captain Cook here. Captain Cook continued north along the coast. He didn't know he was about to make another great discovery, a dangerous discovery. Late on June 11th, under a bright moon, the Endeavour crashed into something rock solid. The ship became stuck. Cook and his crew were 12 miles from shore. They tried to move the ship back into deep water by lightening the ship's loads. They threw as much as 50 tons, that's like 50 small cars, of cannons, coal and cargo, so stuff that got on board, overboard. They waited until morning, hoping that the high tide would lift the ship, but it stayed stuck. Over here, a leak sprung and water poured into the ship. For the next 12 hours, the men scrambled to save their ship. They took turns at the pumps, trying to push seawater out as fast as it poured in. One sailor filled a canvas sail with wool and sheep's dung and used it to help plug the leak. Around 10 o'clock that night, high tide arrived again. The crew was able to guide the Endeavour off its rocky ledge and back into the deep water. They were saved. Now I wonder what this rocky ledge was they've just discovered. This rocky ledge, however, was not actually rock at all. It was a coral reef. Coral is made up of millions of tiny animals called polyps. It looked like rock. Some of you might have seen it. It looks like rock, and almost like frozen seaweed, almost like rock seaweed. Some of them do anyway. They're all a huge amount of colours. In fact, on the front cover here, we've then got in the background sort of then the coral here as well. And in Australia, there's a huge, vast amount of all this coral that we've got there. This coral reef was one of 3,000 reefs that make up the Great Barrier Reef. So a collection of reefs, so almost imagine like a collection of rock. There were 3,000 collections of rocks, and they made up this Great Barrier Reef. For more than 6 weeks, this is after they've been stranded, remember, for more than 6 weeks, Captain Cook and his crew repaired the Endeavour onshore, so whilst they were on the shore of Australia. More than 2 months after the crash, Cook was finally able to steer the ship through the reef and out into the open ocean. Captain Cook's discovery, because he didn't mean to make that discovery, remember, of the Great Barrier Reef was only the beginning. Ever since, this miracle of nature has captured the imagination of explorers, scientists, and tourists alike. Today, more than 1 million people visit the Great Barrier Reef each year, and we've only just begun to understand it. So it's still this ridiculously popular place to go, and lots of people go diving there as well to see all the beautiful colours that we've got there. But we will be learning more about the Great Barrier Reef next week. This week we're just looking at transporting everything over into Australia and Captain Cook as well. So now we're on to the questions. So if I swap, give me a second to swap my camera over. There I am again. And I'm also then going to share my screen. So you can see, there we go. Your questions. So here are your 4 questions. 4 questions. We'll talk about 10 questions. What was the ship called? Captain Cook commanded. Which planet was Cook and his crew to record information about? What was Cook's secret mission he received? Which coast did the Navy want Cook to explore? What 2 names was Australia known as before Britain claimed it as their own? What year did Britain manage to claim all of Australia as their own? On the June the 11th, what happened to Captain Cook's ship? How did one sailor try to stop a leak? How many coral reefs make up the Great Barrier Reef? And then finally, how long was the crew repairing the ship on shore? Now, how are you going to record all these questions? Easy. I'm going to put the camera back on now. Now you've got these. So obviously you can pause these the video on these questions so you know how many questions you've got to do. So I'll stop the share there. And I'll change back over to this. And then I'll also change it so you're not reading it backwards and upside down. There we go. So you're going to have your purple book, your box set book now at home, hopefully. And you're going to turn to a new page. Now, some of you will have work already, like we did in school. That's fine. You could just go on to the next page from that. Obviously, we haven't got blogs anymore to go in these books. That's absolutely fine. All I expect you to do is put the date on the top. So the date is, I need to actually just check what the date is. 11th, there we go. So you put down in here, Monday the 11th. And then all we're expecting you to do after that, great, I pick a pen, that doesn't work. Luckily I've got another one. Monday the 11th. What's the month? January, capital J. January. And the year is not 2020 anymore, it's 2021. You're going to underline that with a ruler. Ta-da! And then you're then going to put the title, Comprehension. The reason why we're putting these titles is because then you can always go back to previous lessons. You're like, oh, I knew that was a comprehension lesson, I learned that. And then it's very obvious which lesson you've then got. So comprehension, and then missing a line, and then I'm going to put 1 in the margin. Now, if I remember, question 1 was, what was the ship called that that Captain Cook was captain of? I'm not going to tell you the answer of that. However, you're not just going to put it the name of the ship. I want you to tell me the ship which Cook commanded was. You're then going to tell me what that ship was, and then you're then going to put a full stop in your sentence. Okay, then you're then going to go on to question 2 and answer then question 2 for me. Once you've done all your answers, you can then go back, check them, mark them, tick them if you've got them right. Obviously, be honest with yourself, please. That'd be fantastic. Take a picture of your work and then send it to us on your Class Dojo portfolio. If you put them on your portfolio, it's a lot easier for us to mark and send your feedback back as well. When we've then done this work, we're then going to go into the habit of ruling off, and then we'll put the date of the next lesson, the title of the next lesson, and then carry on working as well. If you've got any questions, let us know on Class Dojo. There'll be myself, there'll be Miss Hersey and Miss Walker around today, as Miss O'Riordan is in school teaching all the children that are there as well. So I shall see you tomorrow. Good luck with it all.